Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. The shocking new report on the Britney Spears conservatorship. Did the pop icon call 911 to report abuse just hours before her emotional courtroom plea?
This is someone who's extremely high functioning.
Federal investigators arrive in Surfside, Florida, the questions and legal implications of the deadly condo collapse.
The whole world wants to know what happened here.
Plus, the ex-wife of former NBA player Lorenzen Wright wants to withdraw her guilty plea to his murder. But her attorney fails to show up for court.
I want a trial. I want the public to hear the real stuff that really happened.
And investigators take the stand in the trial of a Colorado father accused of murdering his own son. Why did Mark Redwine not try to call or text 13-year-old Dylan Redwine after he disappeared? Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. Britney Spears' longtime manager calls it quits. It's the latest development after the star spoke out against her conservatorship and as a new report details what's been happening behind the scenes. Angela Levy has more.
Brian, an investigative story from the New Yorker magazine offers new details about the conservatorship as the man who helped launch Britney Spears' career steps down.
Larry Rudolph has been with Britney Spears since she was 13, with the exception of a brief break. Now in a letter obtained by Deadline, Rudolph says he's resigning as Spears' manager. Rudolph writes that he hasn't spoken to Spears in 2.5 years, and he's been told that Britney has been voicing her intention to officially retire. News of Rudolph's resignation comes as the New Yorker published a bombshell story entitled Britney Spears' Conservatorship Nightmare. The story claims Britney Spears called 911 last month, the night before she spoke to the probate court to report conservatorship abuse. Ronan Farrow and Gia Tolentino appeared on Good Morning America to discuss the story.
This appears to be a new escalation in the case, and, it accords with what we learned in her testimony the next day, which is she really did describe this in terms of criminal abuse.
The New Yorker reports on a number of claims, including a family friend who gave testimony that helped create the conservatorship in a brief hearing. Jacqueline Butcher is quoted as saying, "At the time, I thought we were helping, and I wasn't, and I helped a corrupt family seize all this control."
Now, the New Yorker story reports a number of incidents that are questionable regarding Spears' father, Jamie. He is labeled as really the driving force behind the conservatorship. And according to the story, anyone who tried to question it was ousted from Britney Spears' life. Jamie Spears has maintained through his lawyer that he has been upset that his daughter is suffering and that he has been looking out for her best interest. Brian.
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Nicole DeBoard and Terry Austin. Nicole, could the firing of her manager mean there is just less of Britney's to control, making it easier to dissolve the conservatorship?
That's what it looks like from here. I think that a manager stepping down indicates that he doesn't believe there's a need for him to be there in that role, and it does seem that this gives the court more leeway.
Now, Terry, if she does retire, like Nicole was saying, I guess it makes it a little bit easier, but what do you think the court needs to do to make this all work? And have they started to make it right?
I think the court has been very hesitant up until now, but I think it's just a matter of time. Like Nicole said, we saw that the manager just stepped down, and we saw before that the judge did approve Bessemer Trust resigning as the co-conservator. So hopefully her father will voluntarily step down. And if not, now that the court is seeing everyone else is backing away and, they are actually trying to listen to Britney's wishes, maybe the court will do the same thing. Let's hope so anyway.
Yeah, we've heard that even Jamie Spears, her father, wants there to be some sort of evidentiary hearing to at least hear her out. Now, Anjanette, you reported earlier that the New Yorker reports that Jamie Spears has spent a lot of money on crisis PR, and even Britney's lawyer is making a lot of money off the conservatorship, right?
Yeah, according to the New Yorker story, they say that her lawyer, her court-appointed lawyer, Samuel Ingham, is making about $500,000 a year. And even in Los Angeles money, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money to be paid each year. And the story also reports that Jamie Spears was using money from the conservatorship to pay for crisis PR management. That was anywhere from $500 per hour to $900 per hour, depending on what agency he was using. And that cost was really adding up as he was trying to manage manage the fallout from all of this.
Yeah, it's curious to see how those payments were being dashed out. Just a quick follow-up, Terry. In terms of this conservatorship, we're talking about the judge needing to do a little bit more. Do you think that Britney Spears can go even further to a higher court and say, hey, this judge isn't doing enough, I need to resolve this at a higher level?
You know, I think that makes sense, Brian. If the judge continues to ignore her wishes, she can actually go to court herself and try to get everyone removed. So I'm hoping that the judge will do the right thing. But, you know, if not, she should be able to take it to another court or a higher court so that this can get resolved. As we said before, I think that the whole conservatorship system has to be revamped so that the people who are put into the system have the right to make their own decisions.
Yeah, it seems for people like Britney, it's very easy to get into, very difficult to get back out of. This has been a 13-year conservatorship. Thank you, everyone. Turning now to other top legal news, attorneys for R. Kelly are asking for more time before his trial in New York that's scheduled for next month. The singer's attorneys will ask a judge to delay his upcoming trial for federal sex trafficking charges. R. Kelly has been in mandatory quarantine in jail for the past 2 weeks since he was moved to Brooklyn from Chicago. His newly hired defense attorney says he is facing, quote, Herculean effort to get up to speed on the case. A hearing on the matters is now scheduled for Thursday. A former campus police officer in Cincinnati will not face federal civil rights charges for shooting an unarmed black man during a traffic stop. 2 trials for Ray Tenson resulted in hung jurors on murder charges. The Department of Justice reviewed the shooting and right before the holiday weekend announced it was closing the case. Tenson shot and killed Sam DuBose during a traffic stop in July 2015 as DuBose tried to drive away. The University of Cincinnati paid the DuBose family nearly $5 million in a civil rights settlement. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the ex-wife of a former NBA player wants to take back her guilty plea to his murder. But first, the ongoing investigation into the Surfside condo collapse, the legal implications of the deadly disaster as rescuers continue to look for victims under the rubble. Welcome back. The death toll is continuing to rise in Surfside, Florida. And as rescuers brace for severe weather due to a tropical storm, federal investigators are watching closely.
We were focused squarely on search and rescue, but while preserving all possible evidence.
The National Institute of Standards and Technology is leading the federal investigation into the deadly disaster.
And they have been able to tag all of the evidence that has been already gathered, and they are embedded and working with our police department to tag everything that is coming through the pile.
The agency will conduct a full technical investigation to determine the cause of the building collapse.
They've also conducted LiDAR, about 3D picture taking of the building before the demolition. And of course, they've been speaking as well to many, many people with information that could contribute to understanding the causes. 5 lawsuits have been filed so far in the case. On Friday, a Miami-Dade County judge placed the Champlain Tower South Condo Association into receivership. A lawyer for the association told the judge that the board reportedly has about $48 million in insurance coverage and their oceanfront land is valued at $30 to $50 million. The judge authorized the receiver to make direct payments to the residents. Families who've lost loved ones and residents in need of temporary housing will each receive up to $10,000. $2,000 will be provided to cover funeral expenses. The hearing stems from a class action lawsuit filed on June 24th. The condo board voted to accept the receivership and distribute funds. The attorney for the association says every living and accounted for board member was present at the meeting. One member remains unaccounted for. The judge says he wants the case to be resolved in a year. I look forward to learning the truth, as do we all. But I think it will be a while till everything is understood. And I'm very confident that especially the federal investigative team will get to the bottom of this, and that we'll learn what happened, what could have been prevented, and how to make sure it never happens again.
Let's bring in criminal defense attorney Nicole DeBord and Terry Austin. Terry, the condo is going to fight back on all of these charges. Could they use the fact that residents were warned to make these charges go away?
You know, I don't think that that'll be a successful defense. I think the condo board can try to claim that the residents had some responsibility and that they lacked the ability or the desire to move forward with these sort of, repairs. And, they could say that there's contributory negligence there, but it's not going to absolve the condo board of responsibility. Clearly, the condo board had information and they should have acted upon that information. They had a duty to these residents. The residents really wasn't, they weren't able to have access to that. So I think the condo board may be pointing fingers at the residents, but at the end of the day, they're still going to be held somewhat responsible for what occurred here.
Absolutely, I would agree there. Nicole, they are still looking for over 100 people while collecting evidence. Can you describe what an investigation like this may look like?
From a criminal standpoint and from a federal standpoint, there are different things that they will be looking for compared to the civil side. They're going to be trying to determine from a records standpoint who knew what and when in terms of what should have and could have been done to prevent all of these deaths. It's just a horrible, horrible tragedy, and there may be some criminal liability depending on what was known and when.
Makes sense. Probably going to be a lot of emails, a lot of back and forth in terms of, like you said, who knew what and when. Terry, do you think it was a wise move to appoint a receiver to manage the lawsuits?
I definitely think that was a wise move. This is a good judge. He's making sure that all these 5 lawsuits move forward and that they move forward rapidly. He's actually warned the attorneys for the condo board that he wants no delays. He wants this to be all resolved. He's given the receiver the ability to immediately make payments and to resolve any issues. So I think it was a good move. I think it was smart on the condo board's part to decide to select a receiver who could be objective, frankly. They don't have any investment in this. So it's the best move all around, I think.
Now, Nicole, really quick, do you see the facts here? I know we don't have much yet, but when you look at this type of case, do you see that they're most likely going to settle this, or do you think that this could be something that can drag out in terms of litigation, even though the judge wants it to end in a year?
Boy, from here, it sure looks like they ought to settle this and quick. The public is watching. I think any efforts by legal teams to delay what these results should be will be something that brings on a lot of scorn. So I expect that it will settle, and it's just going to be a question of for how much.
Definitely all eyes are on Florida when it comes to this condo. Thank you both. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, we hear from expert phone analysts in the latest developments in the Colorado versus Mark Redwine trial. Plus, the murder of former NBA player Lorenzen Wright, his ex-wife now claiming her innocence, but her attorneys are nowhere to be found. The latest after the break. Welcome back. The ex-wife of a former NBA player wants her guilty plea for murder thrown out. But a hearing was delayed after her attorney couldn't be found. Memphis basketball player Lorenzen Wright was shot to death in July 2010. 7 years later, his ex-wife Sharia Wright Robinson and her accused accomplice Billy Ray Turner were charged in Wright's murder. She pled guilty in 2019 and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. But she's now claiming her confession was coerced and that she didn't have effective counsel. A hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, but was reset because her attorney couldn't be reached, frustrating the court and the victim's mother.
I want her to get a new trial. I want a trial. Lord, give her a trial. Because you're going to get what you deserve if you get your trial. I'm ready for a trial. That plea, that was just something to do on that day.
So you in support of
a trial?
The judge overturning the plea?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So all the facts can get out so everybody can get their right time. 30 years ain't no right time. Lorenz ain't going to be back in 30 years.
Let's bring back criminal defense attorney Nicole DeBoard and co-host Terry Austin. Nicole, not showing up to court when your client is claiming ineffective assistance of counsel, not a good look. Can you break down what that claim is?
Sure. Boy, not a good look at all. And when a trial lawyer's performance falls below the objective standard of reasonableness, that is literally what ineffective assistance of counsel is defined by, as the law says, under Strickland. And in this case, I think there's no question that these are unprofessional errors when you don't even post for a court hearing.
Absolutely. Now, Terry, Wright's claim argues basically the Sixth Amendment, because you have that constitutional right to effective assistance of counsel was violated. But how do you think the judge will rule, and how would that affect her plea?
You know, it really all depends on what exactly happened with the plea. Did she have effective assistance of counsel? Was she told what her rights were? Obviously, under the Sixth Amendment, you have a right to effective assistance of counsel. You have a right to an impartial jury. And if she didn't know all of these things, she could have, I guess, given her rights away. But if the judge explained it to her, if her attorney explained it to her, I think that she is not going to get this plea withdrawn, because as long as she knew all of her rights at the time and they went through the proper procedures, then withdrawing the plea at this point might just be very difficult.
Very, very difficult. For this type of claim, you not only have to show that the lawyer's actions affected the case, but that she took this plea both not knowingly and not voluntarily. A very high hurdle to overcome, but we'll keep you with updates on all of that. When we come back, the lack of communication between a father and his missing son. Could this evidence lead to a guilty verdict in the case against Mark Redwine? And how a failed test by a cadaver dog might help the defense. Our legal analysis next. Welcome back. Now on to the trials we're covering here on the Law&Crime Network, starting with California versus Robert Durst. The real estate heir is accused of shooting and killing his best friend, Susan Berman, in her California home in December 2000. Robert Durst was also on trial for the murder and dismemberment of his former neighbor, Morris Black. Durst admitted to the dismemberment but was acquitted for the murder by claiming self-defense. The prosecution has been reading transcripts from that trial to offer evidence they say is relevant to this case. However, court has been dark due to medical appointments for the defendant, who is suffering from different forms of cancer. And now to Colorado, where an electronic device forensic expert took the stand in the case against Mark Redwine. Mark Redwine is on trial for the murder of his 13-year-old son, Dylan Redwine. Dylan was on a court-mandated visit to his father when he mysteriously disappeared. His remains were found in a wooded area not far from his father's house. This happened after Dylan allegedly found photos of his father cross-dressing in women's lingerie while eating feces from a diaper. A forensic expert who specializes in electronic devices testified there was no attempt from Mark Redwine to communicate to his son after he went missing.
Were you able to detail any calls made from Mark Redwine's phone to Dylan Redwine's phone based on his phone itself on November 18th? Up until December 15th, when the call logs began?
So I don't recall if there were any.
You said the call log started on December 15th, right?
Correct.
So you didn't have any call information prior to that time?
No, I did not.
We also heard from an FBI phone analyst who testified to something similar, saying that there was no communication between the defendant and his son the night he went missing.
So you're aware just generally from the investigation that Dylan was reported missing on the 19th, roughly around 4:30?
Yes.
And then that was the first night that his whereabouts were unknown?
That's correct.
What is the last time that the defendant attempts to call Dylan Redwine on the night of November 19th?
7:34 p.m.
And what is the next time that the defendant tries to call Dylan Redwine's phone?
Here it is on the next page, on the 20th, 7:19 a.m.
So roughly 12 hours overnight, first night he's missing, the defendant doesn't attempt to call him.
That's correct.
And a human remains detection expert testified specifically about the cadaver dogs used in the case. One of the dogs allegedly failed to test during training.
And a chart just like this.
Yes.
And in that testimony, in your direct testimony, you talk specifically about Molly's first attempt to certify, right?
She failed.
Right.
I think she was just too green, too immature, and we learned what we needed to work on.
And then did you go back after that? It indicates on there was a false positive and 2 misses, correct?
Yes.
So that's the kind of thing that's going to keep a dog from certifying, right?
Yes.
Nicole, Mark Redwine didn't call or even look for his son, Dylan. How do you see either side using this fact to help their case?
I feel like the prosecution is really going to use this to demonstrate that he knew that there was no reason to reach out to his son because his son was already dead. On the other side, I can see the prosecution, or excuse me, the defense trying to say, well, he didn't think anything terrible had happened, so there was no urgent need to try to seek out his son. I think prosecution's got the stronger argument.
Absolutely. I think most parents, especially most reasonable parents, will say, hey, if my kid goes missing, I'm going to call, I'm going to text, I'm going to find out who their friends are, go to their local hangout spots. But this father, nothing. I think even a laissez-faire father would do a little bit more than that. Terry, defense counsel made a big deal about the failed certification. Did he make any points, or was he barking up the wrong tree?
He was definitely barking up the wrong tree, Brian. He made no points whatsoever. In fact, I think he lost points. The specialist, the canine specialist who was on the stand, she did an amazing job. She talked about Molly and how she trained Molly and how Molly was certified. And so she did fail one test in 2008, but she passed all of the rest of the tests through 2015, and she actually got certified for reliability. So I think that the defense made much too much about the fact that this one failed test didn't show up, because in fact, it did show up, and the specialist said she talked about it on direct, and the judge got a little upset as far as the defense was concerned. And he said, look, I think she testified about that, and that doesn't look good to the jury. So I think he lost points, and he should have just let that one go.
Yeah, I think he's trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. I get where he's going with that, but especially my dog is trained in German obedience. She failed a test or two, but still works pretty well. I think most people who have dogs understand that they're not always perfect, but they can get there. Thank you both for being here, and thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.